Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I'm going to be making these loaded pocket tags and stuffing them with goodies for Valentine's Day. These will be going out to my nieces and nephews and some other family members. So this is the first time I've made a loaded pocket tag, and most of it I'll be doing cutting by hand. I did use a tag die set from Polkadoodles for some additional embellishments, and I'll be using Digi papers from Polkadoodles. So starting off, I have a sheet of panel that is cut to 8.5 by 4.5, and along the 8.5 inch edge, I'm scoring at 1/2 inch and 1 3/4 inch. This is a 120-pound heavyweight cardstock. So I'm scoring a couple of times with my scoring tool, but I'm going right over those score lines again with my ball stylus, which can go a little bit deeper into the grooves of my scoreboard, and that just gets me a deeper score line, which will make folding this much easier. So I like to do that when I'm using my heavyweight cardstock. At the bottom here, this will be the bottom of my pockets, and I have one pocket that's 1/4 inch deep and another pocket that is 1 inch deep. So I'm lining up along the 4.5 inch edge. The panel will be lined up to 2 1/4 inch, and I'm going to cut a slit just up until it hits that second score line, the 1 3/4 inch mark. Then from that 1 3/4 inch mark, I'm scoring 1/4 inch to the right of that, and then another 1/2 inch to the right of that score line. So that gives me a 1/4 inch gusset and then a 1/2 inch glue tab. So you can see here I've got one that's already cut. I'm going to miter off the corners. That just helps to tuck in those glue tabs so that you don't see them when they get glued down. And that is going to be the base of my loaded pocket tag. So everything is going to be built up from this base. And so I'll just make sure to fold those down and then burnish those fold lines well so that we get nice crisp folds. Then, because I am using my We Are Memory Keepers all-in-one tool, there's a lot of different punches and accessories with this. And so one of the things that you can make is a tag. So I've just punched a hole using the hole punch there, and I have that bit of washi tape as a guide so that because I'm making a lot of these, it's just easier for me to line them up. And with this tool, you can create angled cuts. So I've just noted that I need to line this up at 3 1/8 inch, and that gets me even cuts for the top of my tag. So you can hand cut that and use a handheld hole punch or whatever you have that can create that shape. Next, I'm gonna score for one of the pockets. This is going to be the pocket that is 1 inch deep. So I'm starting off with a panel that is 5 1/4 inches by 4 3/8 inches. And starting on the 5 1/4 inch edge, I'm going to score it at 1/2 inch and 1 inch. Turn it 90 degrees, score it at 1/2 inch and 1 inch, and then turn it another 90 degrees and score it at another 1/2 inch and 1 inch. So I'm making the exact same scoring lines along 3 edges, the 2 sides of the pocket and the bottom. Along the top, there's no scoring. So it'll look like this. And I'm going to make some cuts here to trim off some excess cardstock so that when we fold in these glue tabs and tuck everything in, we don't have a lot of bulk that's going to make it hard to stick everything together. And I know it's a little bit hard to see exactly where I'm cutting, so when I'm done cutting, I'll actually diagram this out so that you can actually see where I'm making my cuts. I'm more or less following my score lines. So okay, here's a rough sketch of everything. So you can see the green line is what the original paper or panel would have looked like. The blue lines are my score lines, and the red lines are where I'm cutting. So I've really just mitered off some of the edges, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to tuck everything in and glue everything down without excess overlapping cardstock. The tuck tabs, they're going to keep the bottom nice and reinforced as well. When the sides get folded in, those tuck tabs are going to get glued down to the bottom. The 3 glue tabs that you see will get adhered to our tag base, and that's what's going to kind of stick to the rest of the project. So hopefully that helps to illustrate where you cut, and I did try to exaggerate some of those angles a little bit just so that it's a little clearer to see. And I'll do that for the second pocket as well. This one was a little bit easier to illustrate because it's 1 inch deep, which makes it a little bit easier to diagram out on camera. But I'll do the same with the other pocket, and I'll share the dimensions of that as well, but I won't pop up a similar diagram. So hopefully you can take a screenshot of that previous one if you want to follow along. So now that all my score lines are in and all the cuts have been in, I'm going to fold and burnish all of those lines down. And I am making two pocket tags on camera today, so that's why you see me doing this twice. Once because I think it might be helpful for you to see on camera what these panels are going to look like ultimately, and then you can also see me doing one in the sped up. So this is the second pocket. This one starts off at 6 inches by 4 3/8. Along the 6 inch edge, I'm going to score at 1/2 of an inch and then at 3/4 of an inch. I'll rotate that 90 degrees and score at 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch, and rotate it again 90 degrees and score at 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch. So this gives us a 1/2 inch glue tab along 3 edges, just like we did for the previous pocket. And instead of a 1 inch depth pocket, this one will be a 1/4 of an inch deep. But I'm basically going to make the exact same cuts. The dimensions are just a little bit different, but the cuts will be really similar, and we'll cut away some of this excess cardstock so that when we fold it down, we don't have a lot of unnecessary bulk and overlapping cardstock. So one of the things that helps me determine whether I'm making like a very shallow angle versus a sharper angle is really just the width of the cardstock. So you can see here the gusset's only 1/4 of an inch, so I don't make a super severe angle on that one because then there won't be that much cardstock left. And as well, I just want that edge to kind of be full. Whereas with the 3 glue tabs, the 2 on the sides and the ones on the bottom, I make those a little bit more severe so that they don't overlap each other once they're folded in. So that's sort of some of the rationale behind whether I'm making a more sharp angle or a more subtle angle. And at the top, I do miter that very slightly, and that's just for a cleaner finish. And so that's the another reason why I don't go too deep there, because there's no danger of overlapping cardstock. It's just more that I don't want the sides to stick up above the front of the pocket, and that helps to make it look a little bit more clean and polished. Okay, so when this is all folded, this is how the pocket will look. But as you can see here, my pocket, I'm going to actually attach it slightly raised from the bottom of my tag. And that's because I wanted the little packet of hot cocoa to be visible. Everything that I was giving was kind of about the same height, but if I made everything kind of flush to the bottom of my tag and stacked it all together, you wouldn't really be able to see the packet of hot cocoa. So that's why that's going to, and you'll see that in a little bit more detail when I actually assemble everything. Okay, so now here's the decorative mats. So this first mat is cut to 2.5 inches high by 4.5 inches wide, and I used the same sort of washi tape guide mark to punch my hole, and that's going to be the decorative pattern paper at the top of my tag. And I'm conserving on paper a little bit because the pockets are going to cover most of the bottom of this tag. So really, I'm only using enough pattern paper to just fall about 1/4 of an inch below the backmost pocket. And if somebody were to actually peer inside, yes, they would see that it's not fully covered, but I think that's okay. This isn't going to be something that somebody's going to keep forever and ever. My nieces and nephews will probably just very eagerly get into all the treats, and then this will probably go in the bin. So it really just needs to look good for that split second for them to enjoy it initially. Okay, so then now that I've got that adhered, I just took my scissors and trimmed this off. I find that was easier than taking it to my all-in-one tool and trimming it at the exact same angle. This is just a little bit easier and a little bit more precise of a fit to the tag. And I am using a combination of dry double-sided adhesive tape and my Collal all-purpose glue. This is a solvent-based glue, and because it's not water-based, it won't sort of wrinkle the paper or anything like that. And because these are Digi papers that I've just printed on, it's a nicer kind of color copy paper, so it's not super thin, but it's definitely not cardstock weight. So I didn't want to risk using a PVA glue, which is water-based and has the potential to wrinkle or warp my paper. And so that's why I've chosen to use Collal all-purpose glue. Okay, so then this second mat layer here is cut to 2.25 inches high by 5 inches wide. So it's wider because it actually wraps around the sort of the gusset of the pocket, and that way you get a nice finish as opposed to just decorating the front and leaving the sides white. So I've gone ahead and, again, I like to put my dry adhesive as close to the 4 edges of my paper as possible, and then I'll squiggle on some liquid adhesive in the center. And that way I get a nice solid stick around the edges and there's no lifting at the edge. But that Collal all-purpose glue, it dries rock hard. And so that also adds some strength to these pockets as well. Okay, so then I just tucked in those 2 little tabs at the bottom and adhered it with some liquid adhesive to the bottom gusset. And I'm just trimming off a little bit of extra cardstock in these mitered corners because I don't want that cardstock to overlap when I go to glue this down to my tag. So here you'll see that again. I've just got a little bit of liquid adhesive on those tuck tabs. I'm tucking them into the bottom and burnishing them really well. And I do like to use liquid adhesive, even though it can be a little bit messy, but the liquid adhesive will give you a nice, strong, permanent hold. And since this isn't really holding anything too heavy, you can kind of make that determination for yourself how thick of a cardstock you need and how strong of an adhesive you need. But I do want everything to kind of adhere very well and be as strong as possible. And so that's why I like the combination of a dry adhesive and a liquid adhesive. The liquid adhesive is also nice for positioning things too, so it gives you that extra little bit of time. Okay, so what I'm doing here is 4.5 inches from the bottom, I'm gonna give myself a little tick mark. And that is where I want the top of my pocket to be. And as you can see, I'm highly customizing this to the items that I'm gifting. So I arrived at all of these measurements because I based it on the hot cocoa packet that I'm using and the fact that I wanted to give these little snack packs of Oreo cookies. and so all of this was determined by the items that I'm gifting. And so you can definitely kind of adjust and customize this if you're planning on gifting different things or loading different things into these pockets. So I'll do that again. At the 4.5 inch mark measured from the bottom of my tag, I'm going to line up the top of my pocket, and I'm going to try my best to make sure that the two sides are flush to the sides of the pocket. And it's hard to get in there and burnish everything, but I do try my best to get my bone folder in there and burnish those glue tabs down. The next pocket is the smaller one. This is going to hold the Oreo cookies. And so I'm going to do the exact same thing. Those little tuck tabs, I'm going to tuck them in and get them adhered to the bottom of my pocket. And I will do the same thing for the second one as well. And here again, I do like when I lay down my double-sided adhesive tape, I like to put it at the edge, so it's going to be at where the fold is, and that just keeps all the edges secured, and you don't get any lifting at the edges when this gets glued down to my tag. So I'll go ahead and glue this, and using a liquid adhesive here is really nice because it does make the bottom of the pocket strong, even though cookies don't weigh that much, so I'm not too worried about the bottom falling out or sagging or anything. But again, you can sort of make that determination based on what you're gifting. And now to attach this to the tag. So again, having this extra layer at the bottom here is just more strength, more sturdiness to the bottom. And so I've glued that to the bottom. The glue tab that came from the tag base has been glued to the front of the pocket. And now I'll glue the sides of the pocket to the rest of the tag. And I'm putting one bone folder in that first 1/4 inch pocket just so that I have a hard surface to burnish against when I go to adhere this pocket. So you'll see that again. I'm going to put down some liquid adhesive on the bottom and on that 1/2 inch glue tab. The 1/2 inch glue tab gets adhered to the front of the pocket. I'm going to burnish everything down here. And then I will, here I'm giving myself an extra little tick mark just so I can make sure that when I adhere this down, it's nice and square, because that can be a little bit challenging, is making sure that the sides are squared with the front. But you can see I'm using my one bone folder as a hard surface under that first 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch pocket and burnishing against it. Okay, so now this piece is a piece that's a little bit of a tricky cut. So I've frozen it here just because if you want, you can take a screenshot of this. This initially starts at 8 inches wide by 4.5 inches tall. You may notice that this actual panel is not 4.5 inches tall. I had to make a little bit of an adjustment when I made this little prototype here. So you want to follow these measurements, 8 inches wide by 4.5 inches high. And this is going to be the decorative paper that wraps around the front of the entire pocket. So along the 8-inch edge, I'm going to score at 1/2, 1 3/4, 4 inches, 5 inches, 7 1/4, and then 7 1/2. When you do this though, I don't know if you've noticed, but I have one tag where the cookie pocket is on the left side, and I have one tag where the cookie pocket is on the right side. And when you're scoring and cutting this panel, you do want to make sure you've got this oriented the correct way, especially if you're working with a pattern paper that has a orientation to it. The height of my cookie pocket is 2 7/8 of an inch high. So you saw that I did cut a portion of this away, and I measured that edge up at 2 7/8 of an inch, and I cut it all the way down to the 1 3/4 inch score mark. And that angled cut just starts from 2 7/8 of an inch, and I cut that all the way up to the top, but not to the top of the 1/2 inch score line. I actually gave myself a tick mark that is 1/4 of an inch away from the 1/2 inch score line, and you'll see why in a second when I go to adhere this down. Because that 1/2 inch, that 1/4 of an inch is going to wrap around the side of the pocket. So I've got some dry adhesive, I've got some of my Kalal all-purpose glue, and I'll start to wrap this around. So apologies that I'm a little bit off camera here. I had to like hold it really close to myself in order to line everything up. But I'm going to take this one section at a time and just pull off the paper liner as I go. And you can see I'm continuing to wrap this around, and then I'll get this tucked around. So most of the folds are going to be mountain folds. There's just this one fold here that's a valley fold as it kind of wraps around that pocket and then folds around the top of the more shallow pocket, and then I'll wrap around the gusset of that 1/4 inch pocket and all the way around to the back. So I'm gonna do that again. So here my pocket is on the right side, so I'm gonna score this with that in mind. So I'm basically kind of reversing things a little bit, and so you can see I'm making the score marks and following what I described earlier. And that's the 1/4 inch mark that I am making so that I know where to cut my diagonal line. This is lined up at 2 7/8, and then I'm going to cut away from that mark to that 1/4 inch mark that I scored earlier, or made a tick mark for earlier. And so this will wrap around the front of my pockets. And so that's why I haven't put any pattern paper on that frontmost pocket, because I knew I would be wrapping it with this pattern paper. And the little angled cut, I think, just helps make it look a little bit nicer and interesting, and also keeps the contents in and hidden from the side. And so I'll wrap this, and you'll be able to see this a little bit more clearly. So I'm first putting down that 1/2 inch glue tab, wrapping it around the side here. And so you can see that first 1/4 of an inch, that lines up with the gusset of that first pocket. And then I make the angled cut from the front of, from that 1/4 of an inch down to the front of my cookie pocket, as I'm calling it. And I'll just continue to kind of pull up that paper release liner as I go, and try as much as possible to get everything nice and flush, and using that same trick of putting one bone folder into the 1/4 inch pocket as a hard surface, I'll burnish that down as well as I can. Okay, so with my pockets pretty much complete, what I'll do now is create a rosette. And so this is 11 inches long, and I've made a couple of different sizes, but basically whatever the diameter you want for your rosette, just divide that in 2, and that is how wide you want to cut your strip of paper here. And I'm scoring at every 1/4 of an inch. But what I'm doing is I'm alternating my scoring. So on one side, I'll score at every 1/2 inch, and then I turn my paper around to the back side and I score every 1/2 inch, but in between those first set of score lines. So ultimately, I'll have folds that are every 1/4 of an inch. And the reason why I score it on 2 sides like that is because you generally want to fold your score lines as mountain folds. And because this is sort of an accordion fold where you want mountain, valley, that's why I alternate my scoring the way that I have. So I've just attached the 2 ends together with some liquid adhesive, and then just using a die cut circle, I've glued this circle to the back of my rosette. And you do have to kind of pinch it in a little bit just so that it can hold its shape. And once that's secure, then I am going to add a little heart die cut to the front of my rosette. So super cute, fun to make. Also the first time I've ever created a rosette, and it's really fun. I think it adds something really neat and fun to the project. And I'm going to attach this rosette right to that cookie pocket. It helps to add an extra element to the whole project, but I think it also helps to kind of cover up the cookie packaging a little bit so that the overall effect is, the pattern, the coordinating, pattern papers and solid papers, as opposed to seeing the packaging of the Oreo cookies. So that was one reason to do that. This is a tag that's been cut using a Polkadoodles tag die set, and the little tag also came in the same die set. And what I'm gonna do is just put the initials of who this is going. I mean, everybody's gonna get the same thing, but I thought I would at least put the initials of each of my nieces and nephews so that they know which one is theirs. And if you recognize this foiled polka dot paper, it's actually from an earlier Polkadoodles project that I made, where I printed a altered Digi paper with my black and white laser printer, and then I foiled it using my laminator. So I had leftover panels, which I thought would be really fun to use on these projects as well, just for that extra little bit of shine and flair. And I just used some silver twine to attach my candy cane spoon to that tag. And this panel that I'm cutting down is 4 1/4 inches wide by 6 3/4 inches high, and I'm punching a hole at the top. This is actually going to just cover up the back of my tag to hide those glue tabs on the back there. So it gives it a nice clean finish, and it's just another layer of cardstock that's going to help strengthen this tag overall as well. So it's serving a little bit of double duty here. And so I'll get these two panels attached, and again, using the Kalal all-purpose glue, that will also give it some extra strength too. And everything I'm putting in here, it's not that heavy. So, you know, the Kalal all-purpose glue may not necessarily be needed in this case, since I'm not putting anything heavy, but I figure better safe than sorry. It's just a little bit of glue. So, and just like the front of this, I am just going to use my scissors to trim off the corners to make it match exactly the tag. So a little bit of ribbon at the top, and I do have some fraying, but that's okay. I'll trim this, and then I'm gonna put some fray check on the edges here, and that'll prevent it from fraying more. Especially, you know, once this is in transit and the kids are getting into it. So I just use my pokey tool to poke 2 little holes through this tag, and I'm gonna thread my twine in from the back, and I'm gonna loop it around a couple times. Loop it around my candy cane spoon a couple times, and then loop it around my little mini tag as well before I tie a nice little bow to finish it off. And I am using glue dots. I put 1 glue dot exactly over that twine in the back, so that helps to secure it, and hopefully you know, those holes don't get any bigger or anything like that. And I'm just using glue dots to adhere the whole thing down to the pocket tag. And I thought that this one needed a little bit of extra silver, so I decided to add an extra heart to the front of the rosette on that one. So here's what it looks completely loaded up with all of the goodies. And I am making these in 2 different colorways, but because I do want to mix it up so that not everybody's gonna have the exact same, you know, looking pocket tag, but everybody's gonna be getting the same treats and the same goodies. So here is a final look at 3 out of the, I think I'll end up making 12 of these. So lots of fun to make. It's slightly involved process, but I think it's well worth it. And for me, it was a lot of fun, and I think the folks getting these will enjoy it as well. I hope that you enjoyed this video too, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you want to catch new videos as I post them, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing the notification bell. Thanks so much. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.